They called me while I was standing over my son's casket, not to offer condolences, not to apologize for their absence, but to ask if the funeral was over yet so they could claim his trust fund for a wedding. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who took everything they threw at me, and became the woman who would make them pay for treating my Leo like he never existed. The rain hammered against the stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Church in Queens, that gray October morning. I stood alone in the third row, the only mourner in a sea of empty wooden pews. Father Murphy's voice echoed through the hollow space as he recited prayers over the tiny white casket that held my 6-year-old son. Leo's picture sat on top, his brown eyes sparkling with the kind of innocent joy that made my chest ache so badly I could barely breathe. He was wearing his favorite Superman shirt in that photo, the one he insisted on wearing every single day until it was threadbare and faded. The church was so quiet I could hear every raindrop, every creak of the old building settling. No family, no flowers from anyone but me. Just me, Father Murphy, and the suffocating weight of loss that pressed down on my shoulders like a physical thing. I had called them all. My father David, my stepmother Martha, my younger half-sister Chloe. I sent them the funeral details 3 times. I begged them to come, to at least acknowledge that Leo had existed, that he had mattered. The silence that came back was deafening. As Father Murphy began the final blessing, my phone vibrated violently in my coat pocket. The screen lit up with Chloe's name. My hand shook as I answered it, some desperate part of me still hoping she was calling to apologize, to say she was sorry she couldn't make it. Instead, I heard thumping music and loud laughter in the background. Chloe's voice cut through, sharp and impatient, slightly slurred from drinking. "Hey, is the brat finally buried? Mom says you're being dramatic about the whole thing." She paused, and I heard someone shouting in the background to turn up the music. "Look, I need to talk about Leo's trust fund. My wedding is in 2 months, and Brad wants to book this insane venue in the Hamptons. It's $100,000, but it's going to be amazing. Since the kid is dead anyway, you need to sign over that money like yesterday." Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed through the speaker, harsh and commanding. "Emily, stop with this ridiculous grieving spectacle. The boy is gone. That money was set up by your grandmother for family use, and Chloe's future is more important than some memorial for a child who isn't here anymore. You're the trustee, so do your damn job and transfer the funds. We'll be at your apartment tomorrow to finalize everything." The call ended abruptly. I stood there with the phone pressed against my ear, listening to dead air while rainwater dripped from my coat onto the church floor. Father Murphy was watching me with concern, but I couldn't look at him. I could only stare at Leo's casket, at his smiling face in that photograph, and feel something crack wide open inside my chest. Not just grief anymore, something harder, something that burned. I walked over to the casket and placed my hand on the smooth white wood. "They're going to pay for this, baby," I whispered. "I promise you, they're going to know exactly what they've done." The week after the funeral passed in a blur of sleepless nights and cold rage. I lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest building in Elmhurst, Queens, the kind of place where the radiators clanked all night and you could hear your neighbors' conversations through the thin walls. It was a far cry from the sprawling estate in Great Neck where I had grown up, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every moment of peace I had here, I had earned without their help. Leo's room was exactly as he had left it, his toy cars lined up on the shelf, his drawings taped to the walls, mostly pictures of superheroes and our family of 2. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. Sometimes I would sit on his little bed and hold his favorite blanket, the blue one with stars that we had picked out together at Target, and I would plan. Thursday morning arrived with brutal sunshine that felt wrong given the darkness consuming my thoughts. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched when I heard the aggressive rumble of an expensive engine outside. Through my window, I watched a silver Mercedes GLS park arrogantly across 2 spaces in front of my building. My father emerged first, checking his Rolex with the same irritated expression he always wore when forced to visit my neighborhood. Martha followed, clutching a burgundy Hermes Birkin bag that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. Chloe came last, tapping on her phone, wearing a cream-colored designer dress and heels completely inappropriate for the cracked sidewalk. I didn't open the door when they knocked. I made them wait, made them knock 3 times before I finally turned the handle. They swept in like they owned the place, Martha's nose wrinkling as she glanced around my modest living room with its second-hand couch and discount store coffee table. "Good Lord, Emily," Martha said, setting her bag down with exaggerated care as if my furniture might contaminate it. "You live like this? No wonder you couldn't keep Michael around. No wonder your son was so—" She trailed off, but the judgment hung heavy in the air. My father didn't bother with pleasantries. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slapped it onto my coffee table. "We don't have time for your emotional breakdown, Emily. Chloe's wedding is in 8 weeks. The Ashford estate in Southampton requires a deposit of $50,000 by next Friday, and we need the remaining $50,000 for the caterer, the dress alterations, and the honeymoon suite Brad wants in Bali. You're going to sign these papers transferring Leo's trust fund to Chloe today." Chloe had thrown herself onto my couch, her shoes still on, and was flipping through a bridal magazine she had brought with her. Honestly, Emily, it's not like Leo needed a college fund anymore, she said without looking up. I'm alive. I have a future. That money should go to someone who can actually use it. You're being selfish by holding on to it just because you're sad. Something cold and sharp settled in my stomach. I looked at each of them, really looked at them. My father, with his expensive suit and his complete lack of empathy. Martha, with her surgically enhanced face frozen in perpetual disapproval. Chloe, with her oblivious entitlement, treating my son's death like a minor inconvenience. These were the people who were supposed to be my family. You didn't come to his funeral, I said quietly. What? My father looked annoyed at the interruption. Leo's funeral. None of you came. Not one of you sent flowers. Not one of you called to ask how I was doing. You didn't come to the hospital during his surgeries. You didn't visit when he was sick. You didn't acknowledge his birthday. And now you're in my home, demanding that I give you his money for a party. Martha waved her hand dismissively. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. We had commitments. And frankly, Emily, you made your choices when you married that useless Michael and had a child with such severe health problems. We weren't going to enable your poor decisions by getting too involved. Enable my poor decisions? My voice was getting louder now and I didn't care. Leo was a child. He was your grandson. He was Chloe's nephew. He had 3 open-heart surgeries before he was 6 months old. He spent more days in the hospital than at home. And he was the sweetest, bravest little boy who never complained, who always smiled even when he was in pain. And you called him a poor decision? Chloe finally looked up from her magazine, rolling her eyes. Oh my God, here we go with the St. Leo speech. Look, Emily, I get that you're grieving or whatever, but the rest of us have lives to live. The money was set up by grandmother Eleanor for the family, not just for one kid who happened to die young. Sign the papers so we can all move on. My father stood up, his face reddening. That's enough. Emily, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. You will sign these papers today or we will take you to court. And I guarantee you, no judge is going to side with an unemployed single mother living in this dump over a respected family with the resources to fight. We'll drag out every mistake you've ever made, every failure. We'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you were. He stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same expensive scent that used to make me feel safe when I was a little girl. Now it just made me nauseous. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. Do you understand me? Sign the damn papers. I pulled my arm free, and something shifted inside me. I felt it physically, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The fear that had kept me compliant my entire life, the desperate need for their approval that had made me accept their neglect and criticism, it all just evaporated. I said, What did you say? Martha stood up, her face a mask of shock. I said, Get out of my home. I'm not signing anything. That money was left in trust for Leo's future, his education, his care. Just because he's gone doesn't mean it becomes Chloe's wedding fund. You want it? You take me to court. And while you're at it, I'll make sure every person in that courtroom knows exactly what kind of people you are. I'll make sure they know you didn't come to your own grandson's funeral because you were at a country club brunch. I'll make sure they know you called a dying child a burden and a mistake. My father's face turned purple. You wouldn't dare. Do you know what I can do to you? Do you have any idea who I know? I will destroy you, Emily. I will make sure you never work again, never have peace again. I walked to the door and opened it. I've already lost everything that mattered. You can't threaten someone who has nothing left to lose. But I promise you this, I will fight you with everything I have left. Leo deserved better than being erased like he never existed. And I'm going to make sure his memory means something, even if I have to burn everything down to do it. Martha grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage. You'll regret this, Emily. We gave you everything. We raised you. And this is how you repay us? You gave me everything? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You gave me a childhood where nothing I did was good enough. You gave me a stepmother who made it clear I was always less important than her biological daughter. You gave me a father who saw me as a disappointment from the day my mother died. And when I needed you most, when Leo was fighting for his life, you gave me silence. So no, I don't owe you anything. Chloe stormed past me, her magazine clutched to her chest. You're going to be sorry, Emily. When I'm married and living my best life, and you're alone in this pathetic apartment with nothing but pictures of your dead kid, you'll wish you had been smart enough to stay on our good side. They left in a fury of slammed doors and shouted threats. I watched through the window as they climbed back into their Mercedes and peeled away from the curb. Only then did I let myself sink onto the couch, my whole body shaking. But underneath the fear and the adrenaline, there was something else. Determination. I had spent 32 years trying to win their love. Now I was going to make them face what they had done. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I asked for help. I found a small law office in Brooklyn, tucked between a bodega and a laundromat, run by a young attorney named Sarah Chen who had just passed the bar 2 years ago. Her office was cramped and cluttered with case files, and she looked up at me with tired eyes when I walked in without an appointment. "I need a lawyer," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I don't have much money, but I have a case that matters." Sarah listened to my entire story without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression growing more serious as I described my family's behavior, the trust fund, the phone call during the funeral, their demand for the money. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me. "This is going to be ugly," she said bluntly. "If your family has the resources you say they do, they'll bring in expensive lawyers who will try to tear you apart. They'll question your parenting, your finances, your mental state. They'll make you relive the worst moments of your life in front of a courtroom full of strangers." "I know," I said. "But I can't let them win. I can't let them take the last thing Leo has left and use it for champagne fountains and ice sculptures." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we need to build an airtight case. I'll need every piece of documentation you have. Medical records, bank statements, text messages, emails, phone records, everything. If they've said cruel things about Leo, if they've demanded money, if they've shown a pattern of financial exploitation, I need proof." I spent the next 3 weeks buried in paperwork. I went through my phone and screenshot every text message Chloe had sent me over the past 2 years. Messages like, "When is that kid finally getting better? You're so boring now. All you talk about is hospitals." And, "Can you lend me $500? Dad cut my allowance and I need new shoes." "It's not like you're spending money on anything important." Messages from Martha saying, "Perhaps it would be easier for everyone if Leo went to a special facility where he could be cared for by professionals. You're clearly overwhelmed." I pulled my bank records and highlighted every transaction that showed me draining my savings to pay for Leo's medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. Co-pays, medications, special equipment, the medical travel costs, when we had to go to Boston Children's Hospital for his 3rd surgery. I had spent almost $40,000 of my own money I had saved before Michael left, before I became a single mother with a sick child and no support system. I gathered Leo's medical records, every single page documenting his fight for life. 3 open heart surgeries before he was a year old to correct a complex congenital heart defect, dozens of hospital stays for complications, infections, setbacks. The notes from his pediatric cardiologist, describing him as a remarkably resilient patient with a wonderful spirit despite his challenges. The last report, dated 3 days before he died, showing that his heart had finally given out after years of struggling. But the hardest part was listening to the recordings. After that phone call during the funeral, I had started recording every conversation with my family. I bought a small voice recorder online and kept it in my pocket whenever they called. I recorded my father telling me that Leo's death was a blessing in disguise because now you can focus on getting your life together instead of being a nursemaid to a defective child. I recorded Martha saying that my grandmother would have wanted the trust fund to go to the grandchild with a real future, not the one who was barely alive anyway. I recorded Chloe laughing with her friends about how Emily is so pathetic, clinging to that dead kid's memory like it's going to bring him back. Each recording felt like swallowing glass. But I listened to every one, transcribed them, and added them to Sarah's growing file. During this time, my family ramped up their campaign against me. My father used his connections to spread rumors about me in our old social circles. I started getting messages from people I used to know, distant relatives and family friends, saying they heard I was having a mental breakdown, that I was being irrational and cruel to my family during their time of need. Chloe posted on social media about how she was dealing with family drama from jealous relatives who can't stand to see others happy, and got hundreds of sympathetic comments. Martha called me twice, trying a different approach. Her voice was syrupy, sweet, fake concern dripping from every word. "Emily, darling, we're worried about you. You're not thinking clearly. All this stress, losing Leo, it's affected your judgment. Why don't you come stay with us for a while? We can take care of you, help you get back on your feet. And we can work out this silly money issue as a family." I almost laughed. "You mean you can pressure me into signing the papers while keeping me isolated from anyone who might support me?" "No thank you, Martha." The sweetness disappeared instantly. "You're making a huge mistake. When we're done with you in court, you won't have anything left. Not your dignity, not your reputation, and certainly not that money." But I kept going. Sarah filed our response to their lawsuit, and we requested a court date. We built our case piece by piece, evidence by evidence. Sarah worked late nights, often calling me at 10 or 11 p.m. to ask follow-up questions, to clarify details. She believed in what we were doing, and that belief kept me standing when everything else felt like it was crumbling. I barely slept. Every night I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Leo, remembering the way he would curl up next to me when he didn't feel well, his small body seeking comfort. Remembering his laugh, the way his whole face would light up when he was happy. Remembering the last time I held him in the hospital, how he whispered, "I love you, Mommy," even though breathing was so hard for him. "I'm doing this for you, baby," I would whisper into the darkness. "I won't let them erase you. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I woke up at 5 a.m., too anxious to sleep. I put on the only professional outfit I owned, a simple black dress and blazer I had bought at a discount store. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I had lost weight from stress, and there were dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't fully hide. But my eyes themselves were different, harder, more determined. Sarah met me outside the Manhattan courthouse at 8:30. It was a cold November morning, and the wind whipped between the tall buildings. She was carrying 2 briefcases full of our evidence. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I've been ready since they called me at Leo's funeral." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. There were a few reporters in the back, tipped off by the dramatic nature of the case. My family was already there, sitting with their legal team. My father wore a navy suit that probably cost $5,000. Martha had on pearls and a designer dress. Chloe was in all white, playing the innocent bride-to-be. Their lawyer was a silver-haired man in his 60s who exuded confidence and expensive billable hours. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. I forced myself not to look at them, but I could feel their stares burning into the back of my head. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Judge Patricia Morrison. She reviewed the case summary briefly, then looked up at both parties. "This is a dispute over a trust fund established for a minor child who has recently passed away. The defendants are seeking to have the funds redirected to another family member. The trustee and mother of the deceased child is contesting this. Is that correct?" Both lawyers confirmed. Then the other side went first. Their attorney, Mr. Whitmore, stood and immediately began painting me as an unstable, grief-stricken woman making irrational decisions. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned about Miss Emily Watson. She has recently suffered the tragic loss of her son, and in her grief, she has become hostile and unreasonable. The trust fund in question was established by the late Eleanor Morrison, the family matriarch, for the benefit of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, not for one specific individual. With young Leo tragically deceased, the practical and appropriate course of action is to reallocate these funds to Miss Chloe Morrison, who is very much alive and about to begin a new chapter of her life." He went on, describing Chloe's upcoming marriage, her bright future, the importance of supporting living family members rather than clinging to the past. He made it sound reasonable, compassionate even. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood, and her voice was steady and clear. "Your Honor, this case is not about the reallocation of family funds. This case is about whether a deceased child's legacy can be stripped away to fund a party. It's about whether cruelty and neglect should be rewarded. And it's about whether the court will allow a vulnerable woman who just buried her 6-year-old son to be victimized by the very people who should have supported her." She began presenting our evidence methodically. First, Leo's medical records. She displayed them on a screen for the court, page after page documenting his struggle. Born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a severe congenital heart defect. First surgery at 2 weeks old. Second surgery at 4 months. Third surgery at 11 months. Complications, setbacks, infections. But through it all, fighting to live. "Leo Watson spent more time in hospitals than in playgrounds," Sarah said. "And throughout his entire short life, his mother Emily was by his side. Every surgery, every setback, every midnight crisis. She was there." She pulled up my bank records next, showing the court how I had depleted my savings to pay for his care. Emily Watson spent her life savings, over $40,000, on her son's medical expenses. She did this alone. Her ex-husband left when Leo was 1 year old, unable to handle the stress, and her family, the defendants, provided no financial support, no emotional support. In fact, they provided nothing but criticism. Then came the text messages. Sarah displayed them on the screen one by one, and I watched my father's face go pale as Chloe's words appeared for everyone to read. "When is that kid finally getting better? You're so boring now. Can you lend me money? It's not like you're spending it on anything important. That kid is such a burden on you. No wonder Michael left." Martha's messages were worse. "Perhaps a special facility would be better for everyone. You need to think about your own future, not just Leo's limited one. Some children are not meant for long lives, Emily. It's nature's way." The courtroom was dead silent. I saw one of the reporters in the back row lean forward, writing quickly. But Sarah wasn't done. She played the recordings next. My father's voice filled the courtroom, cold and dismissive. "The boy is gone. That money should go to someone who can actually use it. Stop being dramatic, Emily." Martha's voice next, dripping with false sympathy. "Leo's death was a blessing in disguise. Now you can focus on getting your life together." And finally, Chloe's voice, recorded just 2 days before the hearing, when she had called me one more time to demand the money. "I don't care about your dead kid, Emily. I need that money for my wedding. You're being selfish and crazy. Everyone knows you're crazy." Judge Morrison's expression had changed from neutral to something much colder. She looked directly at my family. Then Sarah called me to the stand. I walked up on shaking legs and swore to tell the truth. Sarah's questions were gentle but thorough. She asked me to describe Leo, and I did. I told the court about his love of superheroes, how he would wear his cape even in the hospital. I told them about his bravery, how he never complained even when he was in pain. I told them about the day he died, how I held his hand and told him it was okay to let go, that I would be okay, even though it was a lie. "Did your family attend Leo's funeral?" Sarah asked. "No." My voice cracked. "No one came. It was just me and Father Murphy in an empty church." "And what happened during that funeral service?" I took a deep breath. My phone rang. It was my sister Chloe. She called to ask if Leo was buried yet, because she needed to talk about his trust fund for her wedding. My father got on the phone and told me to stop with my grieving spectacle, that Leo was gone and I needed to transfer the money immediately. There was an audible gasp from someone in the courtroom. Judge Morrison's jaw tightened. "How did that make you feel, Emily?" "Like my son didn't matter. Like his whole life, all his suffering, all his strength. It meant nothing to them. Like they wanted to erase him completely and use what was meant for his future to pay for champagne and wedding cakes." "And what do you want to happen with the trust fund?" I looked directly at Judge Morrison. "I want to honor my son's memory. I want to create something good from this tragedy. If the court rules in my favor, I plan to establish a charitable foundation in Leo's name that will help other single mothers whose children have serious medical conditions. I want his name to mean something. I want him to have mattered." Sarah sat down, and then it was Mr. Whitmore's turn to cross-examine me. He tried to break me down, suggesting I was mentally unstable, that I was being vindictive, that I was using my son's death to punish my family for imagined slights. But I had been through too much to be broken by a lawyer's questions. I answered calmly, truthfully, and let the evidence speak for itself. Then it was my father's turn on the stand. "Mr. Whitmore tried to present him as a concerned parent worried about his daughter's mental state, but Sarah's cross-examination was brutal. She pulled out records showing that my father and Martha had used family trust funds in the past to cover gambling debts and luxury purchases. She showed credit card statements with tens of thousands of dollars spent on country club memberships, vacations to Europe, designer shopping sprees, all while claiming they couldn't afford to help with Leo's medical bills. "Mr. Morrison, did you attend your grandson's funeral?" "I had prior commitments," my father said stiffly. "A country club brunch, according to your social media posts that day. Was champagne with friends more important than saying goodbye to your grandson?" He had no good answer. Martha was even worse on the stand, contradicting herself multiple times and finally admitting that she had found Leo's medical condition unpleasant to be around. Chloe, when called, was a disaster. She was defensive and entitled, insisting she deserved the money because she was young and had her whole life ahead of her. "It's not fair that Emily gets to control all that money just because her kid died," she actually said, and I watched Judge Morrison's eyes flash with anger. The closing arguments were relatively brief. Mr. Whitmore tried to salvage the case by arguing for the family's unity and the practical reallocation of unused funds. Sarah stood and spoke simply. "Your Honor, Eleanor Morrison established that trust fund with specific intentions. She wanted her great-grandchildren to have opportunities, to have futures. Leo Watson's future was cut tragically short, but that doesn't mean his legacy should be gutted to fund a wedding. The evidence shows a pattern of financial exploitation, emotional neglect, and stunning cruelty from the defendants. Emily Watson is requesting that the court protect her son's memory and allow her to use those funds as intended, to help children and families in need. She's not asking for personal gain. She's asking for justice." Judge Morrison took less than 10 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was stern. "I have reviewed the evidence presented today, and I find the defendant's behavior appalling. The text messages, recordings, and testimony paint a picture of a family more concerned with material wealth than with human life. The trust fund established by Eleanor Morrison was intended for the benefit of her descendants' futures. Emily Watson's proposal to establish a charitable foundation in her son's name fulfills that intention far better than funding a wedding." She looked directly at my father. "Mr. Morrison, I am frankly disturbed by your complete lack of compassion toward your daughter during one of the most difficult experiences any parent can face. Your absence from your grandson's funeral, followed immediately by demands for his trust fund, demonstrates a moral bankruptcy that this court cannot and will not reward." She turned to me. "Miss Watson, the trust fund remains under your control as trustee. You are authorized to use those funds to establish the Leo Watson Foundation as you have described. Additionally, given the evidence of past financial impropriety with other family trusts, I am ordering an audit of the Morrison family financial accounts going back 10 years. The gavel came down. I sat there stunned, tears streaming down my face. Sarah was squeezing my hand, saying something I couldn't quite hear over the rushing in my ears. Behind me, I heard Chloe burst into loud, dramatic sobs. My father was on his feet, red-faced and furious. "This is outrageous. You can't do this. We'll appeal. We'll take this to a higher court." Judge Morrison's voice was ice. "You are welcome to appeal, Mr. Morrison. I'm confident my ruling will stand. We're adjourned." I walked out of that courtroom with my head high for the first time in years. Outside, reporters were waiting, and Sarah handled them while I just stood in the November sunshine, breathing. The aftermath was swift and brutal for my family. The story hit local news that evening. Wealthy family tries to claim dead child's trust fund for wedding, was the headline on one news site. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Social media exploded with outrage. My father's business started losing clients. Martha was quietly asked to resign from the charity boards she sat on. And Chloe's wedding fell apart when her fiancé Brad, unable to handle the public scrutiny and the revelation of who he was marrying into, called off the engagement. I watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a bone-deep weariness and the beginning of something that might have been peace. 3 months later, I stood at Leo's grave in the small cemetery in Queens. It was a sunny February day, cold but bright. I had just come from the lawyer's office where we had finalized the Leo Watson Foundation. The trust fund would provide grants to single mothers whose children had serious medical conditions, helping with expenses that insurance wouldn't cover, helping them avoid the financial devastation I had faced. "We did it, baby," I whispered, placing fresh flowers on his headstone. "Your name is going to help so many other kids. You're going to matter to people who never even got to meet you." I had also started volunteering at the children's hospital where Leo had spent so much time. Once a week, I would sit with parents in the ICU waiting room, offering comfort and understanding that only someone who had been through it could provide. It was painful, but it was also healing. Each family I helped felt like another way to honor Leo's memory. My family tried to contact me a few times. My father sent several threatening letters through lawyers, all of which Sarah dealt with. Martha called once, her voice strained, asking if we could put this unpleasantness behind us and have a family dinner. I hung up on her. Chloe sent a long, rambling email blaming me for ruining her life, saying I was vindictive and cruel and she hoped I was happy now that I had destroyed her future. I deleted it without finishing it. The financial audit Judge Morrison had ordered uncovered years of mismanagement and improper use of family funds. My father and Martha were facing significant fines and potential charges. Their reputation in their social circles was destroyed. Everything they had built their lives around, the status and the wealth and the appearances, it was all crumbling. I felt nothing about it. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. 6 months after the trial, I got a job as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit organization that helped homeless families. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was modest, but it felt meaningful. I moved to a slightly bigger apartment, still in Queens, with better heating and a small balcony where I could grow flowers in the summer. I started seeing a therapist, working through years of trauma and grief. I began to rebuild myself from the ground up, discovering who Emily Watson was when she wasn't trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. 1 year after Leo's death, on the anniversary, I organized a small memorial event at the hospital. Families who had received grants from the Leo Watson Foundation came, about 20 people total. We shared stories, we cried together, and we celebrated the lives of children who had fought so hard. A local news channel covered it, and the reporter asked me how I found the strength to turn tragedy into something positive. I thought about it for a moment. "I almost let them win," I said honestly. "My family, they wanted me to disappear quietly, to let Leo be forgotten. They thought I was weak, that I would just accept whatever they decided because that's what I had always done. But they were wrong. They didn't break me. They gave me clarity. When you lose everything that matters, you stop being afraid. And when you stop being afraid, you become very dangerous to people who rely on your fear to control you." The reporter seemed surprised by my answer, but she included it in the story. The clip went viral again, shared by domestic abuse advocates and family estrangement support groups. I got hundreds of messages from people telling me their own stories of toxic families, of finding the courage to set boundaries, of learning that blood relation doesn't guarantee love or loyalty. I answered as many as I could, offering what comfort and advice I had learned. 2 years after the trial, my father had a health scare, a heart attack, relatively mild but frightening enough. Martha called to tell me, her voice small and uncertain, "He's asking for you, Emily. He wants to see you. He says he's sorry." I was quiet for a long moment. Part of me, the little girl who had desperately wanted her father's love, wanted to believe it, wanted to rush to the hospital and reconcile.